Okay, so hello everybody and welcome back. Happy New Year and all that jazz. We are now going into, can you believe it, week 5. It feels like we've only just started this, but we're going into week 5 out of 10 for this module, which is the language papers. And you're doing very well, which is great. I must also encourage you to use those homework clubs to go through if you want that individual attention, because quite often not everybody, and sometimes not at all, is anybody on there. So but if you need it and you want to check, or you want to up your grade, then obviously pop on there. If you can't make the Thursday night homework club, but you do want to talk to me, do give me a shout and I'll find a time to fit you in. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with you. And today we're going to be looking at paper 2, looking at section A. So as I've said to you before, you have just a little reminder, a little recap on how your language exams work. So you have 2 papers. Each paper has a section A and a section B. I don't know what my neighbours must think me through the window doing this. So 2 papers, section A and section B on each. And then in each of those, the section A is going to be writing and section A is going to be reading and section B is going to be writing. On section A, in the first paper, you will have 1 source. On the second paper, that's the viewpoints and opinions of the writer, that will be 2 sources, and that's the one we're going to be looking at today. On the writing side, in paper 1, you'll be writing, it's your creative writing, so you'll be doing something that's either describing something as suggested by a picture, or writing a story about, it might be a lost friend, or you're writing a story about a memory or something like that. It'd be something quite vague, but you're writing a story on it. In paper 2, the written, hi Stan, in paper 2, the written subject is usually something that's about your opinion. So this paper 2 is literally called Writers' Viewpoints and Perspectives. So when you're looking at the reading side, it's asking you to look at other writers and identify what techniques they're using, how they are using them, how they're basically trying to ask you, can you identify where you're being manipulated as a reader? Then when it comes to your writing in this paper, which is section B, they're asking you to be the writer. So they're asking you to be manipulative with your viewpoints and opinions. You're trying to persuade somebody of something. So for example, I think I've used this one before. It's always quite a controversial one for students. One of the past paper questions was that the education system doesn't work for teenagers because it doesn't accommodate the fact that they sleep differently to adults, they learn differently, and they socialize differently, and that the whole education system needs a revamp to accommodate all those things. And it's right into the education of the head of education in the government. So it's looking at how you can make your argument about whatever it is that you think. And obviously they're setting it up so it's likely that most students will say things like, we need to start later because we sleep in later, we need more sleep, we need to have shorter lessons or lessons with more breaks, or maybe we need to start later and have 2 1-hour breaks throughout the day and finish later in the evening. People come up with lots of different things like that, but ultimately most students feel that the school system and timings and the way they're given a lot of homework and things like that is too stressful, too much, or they're learning the wrong things. So obviously your opinion on this can be real, it can be made up, they're not going to know. Pick the thing that's going to show off your manipulation and your ability to manipulate the reader as much as possible. Okay, and we'll get to that. So we've done paper 1. We've looked at section A, which is looking at 1 source and answering questions on that source, trying to be analytical, pull out the things that the writer has written in a creative way. And then on section B in paper 1, we've looked at how we write on either the description of something as suggested by a picture. So it could be a boat, it could be a train station with people in it, it could be a bridge that's got a sun on, like there's a sun on it, and it's asking you to describe a sunny place or something like that. So it's sort of giving you an idea, but it's a description. Or you choose between that or a story, like I was saying earlier. So we've done paper 1, had a couple of practices on that, and I would strongly recommend that you do as many of those past papers as you can. You can get the link really easily. It's just aqa.org.uk and just select English language, and it will come up with lots of links to past papers. Do as many of them as you can, and do it within the time frame, because I think a lot of people underestimate the skill of exam technique because they think it's going to take so much time, or you're sitting an exam. Actually, the quickest and easiest way that you are going to up your grade is to take a past paper. Because it's timed, you know that you're going to be finished the first section in 45 minutes. So if you did that every week, did 45 minutes on your English revision, and did a 45-minute paper, so did 45 minutes on section A, and then the next week did 45 minutes on section B, and did that from now until June. That's what we at now, halfway through January. So let's ignore January, February, March, April, May, June. So let's ignore June. So 4 months, 4 weeks in each month, 4, 8, 12, 16. So that'd be 8 exam papers, 8 timed exam papers you'd have done by June. You're going to have really got into how you write. And not only that, if you can then look at the mark scheme and you can mark it yourself, you can send it to me if you want, I'll mark it, not a problem. But if you can mark it yourself against the mark scheme, you're going to learn how an examiner would mark it, and you will be able to see how those marks will be awarded and how you can improve. And I really, honestly, I can teach you everything you need to know, but until you go away and learn to apply it in practice in a timed exam conditions setup, it's not going to get you to that even next level, so that by the time you walk into your exam, you almost know what the question's going to be. Because you should know that, for example, what I've said already twice on the call already today, and it's not even 10 past, that section B is going to be between a description of a picture or a story based on a little phrase. Just having that knowledge wipes out a million other things that it could be. So you've got that knowledge, you've got that advantage. A lot of people who are going to their English language exam don't know that. How crazy is that? Or the only way I knew, the only way I did that, is because I kept doing the different past papers and looking for patterns. Okay. So today we're going on to our section A of paper 2, and we have two sources. We have two sources. Darling, I'm teaching now.
Do you have any blue tack?
I don't, I'm afraid, darling. Happy New Year from Charlie. We've got two sources. Now, one is usually a Victorian source and one is usually relatively modern day. So, for example, here, 1933, we wouldn't say it was really modern, but obviously in comparison to the late 1800s, you know, it's quite a bit. It's nearly 100 years after that, isn't it? It's maybe about 60, 70 years afterwards. So there's a real difference in the influences and the viewpoints and perspectives of people living in these two different eras. 1933 is what, about 15, 20 years after World War One. Whereas in 1878 there hadn't been a world war before. So that's quite a big change on how people behave and how people think of things. Now, this is about travelling. So we've got an extract from a travel book and an extract from a letter. Okay, but just knowing and recognizing the difference in those times before you go into reading the paper or anything like that, it just makes you go, oh, okay. And the fact that it says 20th century and 19th century, it's giving you an idea that they want you to compare these two. They want you to look at the differences. Why do people write the way they do? So I always relate to this. I can't remember if I've said this to you guys, maybe not on this course, but I know I have in others, where you almost want to be thinking of it a bit like Google Earth. Okay, so you kind of zoom right in on the question, or on the in this case I'm going to relate it to the text, and you can go, oh, this is what the text is written about, and it says this and it says that. Well, that's all well and good, but why does it say that? What's it trying to do? So let's zoom out a bit and go, okay, well, that might be what the text says, but why has the writer written it that way? What influenced the writer? Okay, or what influenced the text first? So then we look at writers. Then we zoom out again and we go, okay, hang on. Well, if the writer influenced the writing, what influenced the writer? Then we start to look at society and history. And then you can see how we're starting to zoom out. And then if you can zoom out even more, you can say, okay, that might be how it is in that time frame, but what does that do to us now? So, for example, one of the past papers was about how to solve insomnia, and the two sources were again, one was 20th century and one was 19th century, and both of them stated different reasons or solutions that they thought would be good to cure their insomnia. One of them said they woke up and maybe they were hungry, so they started eating. The other one, that was more modern day, said, well, I'm hungry, but I'm not going to eat because that's going to give me energy and keep me awake. And so that came from the knowledge of science, the knowledge of dietary requirements of the human body that were around in later years, but not so much in the earlier years, well, around the time that this was written anyway. And so that information is what they're looking for. Okay, so what, how does that relate to modern day? So then you can say about modern day. Now, it might not ask you that, but that's fine. But if we look at that, zooming out is going to give us an idea of how this piece of writing has come together by zooming out and looking at the piece of writing itself, the author that's created it, the society that's created the author that's created the piece, and then the world at large that's created the society of that time that created the author that created the piece. And that shows you how nothing's by chance. Everything is that's written is intentional and naturally biased. The way that authors write today is naturally going to be very different to how they wrote pre-COVID, because nobody had experienced that before. No one had ever experienced the whole society in lockdown before, a whole world in lockdown. That was scary, So obviously we write very differently now. There's much more emphasis on mental health and things because of the repercussions of that. So they're the kinds of things you want to be thinking about, like, what was the world like? Why was the world like that? How were people thinking? Okay, so let's have a look at these. We've got Source A is an extract from a travel book in which Peter Fleming describes his train journey on the Trans-Siberian Railway in 1933. The journey is over 9,000 kilometres and takes more than a week to complete. And now the journey was almost over. There is no more luxurious sensation than what may be described as the end of term feeling. I felt very content. After tomorrow, there would be no more trips to the dining car, no more of that black bread, the inconsistency and flavour suggesting rancid peat, no more of that equally earthy tea, no more of a monk's existence, no more days entirely blank of action. It was true that I did not know what I was going to do, that I had nothing very specific to look forward to, but I knew what I was going to stop doing, and that, for the moment, was enough. I wandered along the train to my compartment, undressed and got into my bed. As I did so, I noticed for the first time that the number on my berth was 13. For a long time I could not sleep, but eventually I drifted off. All of a sudden there was a frightful jarring, followed by a crash. I sat up in my berth. The berth is like the bed when the beds are kind of stacked against the wall. It's like his little section. I sat up in my berth. From the rack above me, my heaviest suitcase was cannonaded down, catching me with fearful force on either kneecap. This is the end of the world, I thought, and in addition, they've broken both my legs. My little world was tilted drunkenly. The window showed me nothing except a few fields. It was 6 o'clock. I began to dress. I felt very much annoyed, but I climbed out of the carriage into a refreshingly spectacular world, and the annoyance passed. The Trans-Siberian Express train sprawled foolishly down the embankment. The mail van and the dining car, which had been in front, lay on their sides at the bottom. Behind them, the 5 sleeping cars, headed by my own, were disposed in attitudes which became less and less grotesque until you got to the last, which had remained primly on the rails. 50 yards down the line, the engine, which had parted company with the train, was dug in, snorting steam, on top of the embankment. It had a defiant and naughty look. It was definitely conscious of indiscretion. It would be difficult to imagine a nicer sort of railway accident. No one was hurt, the weather was ideal, and the whole thing was done in just the right sort of theatrical manner, with lots of twisted steel and splintered woodwork and turf scarred deeply with demoniac force. This was great fun, a comical and violent climax to an interlude in which comedy and violence had been altogether too lacking for my tastes. It was good to lie back in the long grass on the little hill and meditate upon that sprawling scrap heap. There she lay, in the middle of the wide green plain, the fastest train, the Trans-Siberian Luxury Express. For more than a week she had bullied us. She had knocked us about when we went to clean our teeth in the little bathroom. She had jogged our elbows when we wrote, and when we read, she made the print dance tiresomely before our eyes. Her windows we might not open on account of the dust, and when closed they had proved a perpetual attraction to small sabotaging boys with stones. She had annoyed us in 100 little ways, by spilling tea in our laps, by running out of butter, by regulating our life. She had been our prison. We'd not liked her. Now she was down and out. We left her lying there, a broken buckled toy, a thick black worm without a head, awkwardly twisted, a thing of no use. So lots of personification going in there, describing a train crash, and personifying the train itself. Yeah, I'm going to leave it there for now. Now this is so that one was written in the 1930s. This one is written in this is in 1830, so it's quite early Victorian. So source B is an extract from a letter written by Fanny Kemble to a friend about her first ride on a steam train in 1830 when she was 21. The steam engine had recently been invented by George Stephenson, and he was also on this ride. A normal sheet of writing paper is enough for love, but only a large sheet can contain my raptures about my railroad journey. And now I'll give you an account of my excursion yesterday. A party of 16 persons was ushered into a courtyard where there stood a carriage of a peculiar construction, prepared for our reception. It was a long-bodied vehicle with seats placed across it back to back. The one we were in had 6 of these benches and was a sort of uncovered carriage. The carriage was set in motion by only a push and rolled with us down a slope into a tunnel which formed the entrance of the railroad. Here we were introduced to the little train engine which was to drag us along the rails. She, for they make these curious little fire horses, all mares, consisted of a boiler, a stove, a small platform, a bench, and behind the bench a barrel containing enough water to prevent her being thirsty on our journey. She goes upon wheels, which are her feet, and are moved by bright steel legs called pistons, which are propelled by steam. The reins of this wonderful beast are a small steel handle, which applies or withdraws the steam from its legs or pistons, so that a child might manage it. The coals, which are its oats, were under the bench. This snorting little animal, which I felt rather inclined to pat, was then harnessed to our carriage. Mr. Stevenson and I took our seats from the bench of the train engine, and we set off at about 10 miles an hour. As the steam horse was unable to go up and down the hill, the railroad was kept at a certain level, and appeared sometimes to sink below the surface of the earth and sometimes to rise above it. It was most incredible. Almost from the start, the track was cut through the solid rock which formed a wall on either side of it, about 60 feet high. You can imagine how strange it seemed to be journeying on thus, without any visible cause of progress other than the magical machine, with its flying white breath and rhythmical unvarying pace between these rocky walls. Then, when I reflected that these great masses of stone had been cut asunder to allow our passage far below the surface of the earth, I felt as if no fairy tale was ever half so wonderful as what I saw. Bridges were thrown from side to side across the top of these cliffs, and the people looking down upon us from them seemed like dolls standing in the sky. You cannot conceive what that sensation of cutting the air was. The motion is as smooth as possible. I could either have read or written, and as it was, I stood up, and with my bonnet off, drank the air before me. When I closed my eyes, this sensation of flying was quite delightful and strange beyond description. Yet, strange as it was, I had a perfect sense of security and not the slightest fear, as this brave little she-dragon of ours flew on. We had now come 15 miles and stopped where the railroad traversed a wide and steep valley. Mr. Stevenson escorted me from the train down to the bottom of this ravine, over which, to keep the track level, he has thrown a magnificent viaduct of 9 arches, the middle one of which is 70 feet high, through which we saw the whole of this beautiful little valley. It was lovely and wonderful beyond all words. We then rejoined the rest of the passengers, and the carriage set off at its utmost speed, 35 miles an hour, swifter than a bird flies, on our return journey. When I add that this pretty little creature can run either backward or forward, I believe I have given you an account of all the train's abilities. Okay, so it's referring to one of these. I don't know if you can see that, where people sat in. It's a bit like a horse and carriage, but it's like the engine of the train is the kind of horse, if you like, and this is the carriage, and it just used to go forward and backwards. Okay, whereas they're talking here in 1933 about an actual steam train that can go on its own and is obviously looks very different. So it shows you the progress of the transport there. Okay, so they're your two sources. Let's go to the question paper. So, read again the first part of source A from lines 1 to 7, okay? First part of source A, lines 1 to 7, lovely. So it's this bit here. Choose the 4 statements below which are true. Shade the circles in the boxes that you think are true. Choose a maximum of 4. If you make an error, cross out the whole box. If you change your mind and require a statement that has been crossed out, then put a circle around the box. All right, then draw a circle around the box. Okay, so we're just going to go back and, moving that out of the way. Just going to go back and reread that. So, and now the journey was almost over. There is no more luxurious sensation than what may be described as the end of term feeling. I felt very content. After tomorrow there would be no more trips to the dining car, no more of that black bread, the inconsistency in flavour suggesting rancid peat, no more of that equally earthy tea, no more of a monk's existence, no more days entirely blank of action. It was true that I did not know what I was going to do, that I had nothing very specific to look forward to, but I knew I was going to stop doing that, what I was going to stop doing, and that for the moment was enough. So, now we go back to the question paper. So the writer is at the start of his train journey, yes. The writer is looking forward to leaving the train. Yes, let's come back to that one. They're happy to leave wherever they were. The writer will be on the train for 3 more days. I don't remember reading that. The train has a carriage where meals are served. Don't know if it actually... doesn't actually say that. It does say no more black bread, but it doesn't mean that there's food on the train, because it might mean that he or she is talking about food once they're off. The writer thinks the bread has been delicious. No. The writer feels that he's been cut off from society while on the train, maybe. The writer has had many activities to keep him busy on the train, and the writer does not have any plans for when he leaves the train. So just make sure that it's only in this section, not in other things. So yeah, he's been very bored, hasn't he? He's saying, okay, so he's been on this journey a long time, and he is talking about being glad about coming off. So after tomorrow, there'll be no more trips to the dining car. So yes, there is a dining car that is on the train. So we are talking deliberately about the train rather than what's happened before. No more of that black bread. He did not like the black bread. No more tea. No more of a monk's existence, in other words, having to be good all the time. And no more days entirely blank of action. So he's very bored. So the writer thinks the bread has been delicious. No, the writer feels they've been cut off from society while on the train. He probably does, but he doesn't say that. The writer's had many activities to keep him busy on the train. No. Does not have any plans when he leaves the train. Yes. Okay, so we've got definitely that one. Possibly this one. Definitely that one. Definitely that one. And definitely that one. So yeah, I would say it's those four. You need to refer to source A and source B for this question. The writers in source A and source B are travelling on different types of trains. Use details from both sources to write a summary of what you understand about the differences between the two trains. Not write a summary of the differences between the two trains, but of what you understand about them. That changes the question, okay? So if we look at the mark scheme, so in section A, they're looking for you to identify and interpret explicit, so obvious, and implicit, which means sort of subtext and underhand information and ideas, to select and synthesize evidence from different texts. In other words, by synthesize, they mean taking two things that could mean similar things or similar themes or have some kind of synthesis, this working together. AA2, explain, comment on, and analyze. So if you explain something, you're trying to make someone understand it. If you comment on it, you're judging it. You're saying it's this or that. You're sort of saying something about it. And if you're analysing it, you're trying to work out what it means, okay? Trying to offer suggestions as to what it means, okay? So explain, comment on, and analyse how writers use language and structure to achieve effects and influence readers using relevant subject terminology to support their views. So in other words, you need to explain, comment on and analyse the sources. You need to look at how they do this with structure and the effect and influence on the reader. And you need to make sure that you put in some language techniques using subject terminology, okay? AA3, compare the writer's ideas and perspectives, as well as how these are conveyed across two or more texts. So in other words, saying, yes, they both write about something, say X, they both write about X, but this one does it in this way and this one does it in this way. Or the tone is really similar, but one seems to have a more feminine side and one seems to have more masculine, or one seems to be more authoritative, one seems to be more colloquial and relaxed and chatty, yeah? So it's those kinds of things. And then why? Why did the writer bother? I cannot emphasize this enough. Effect. You'll be sick of me saying it if you've done any other modules with me before. So the effect on the reader. Why have they chosen to do it with that tone? Why have they chosen that vocabulary? Why have they chosen that structure? Why has the writer chosen to do that? Or are they biased? Have they done it just because that's what everybody was doing at that time? Okay. Evaluate texts critically and support this with appropriate textual references. So evaluate means weighing them both up. Yes, this one has this, and yes, that one has that, and this shows that they're both doing this, but this is doing something a bit different because it does this, whereas that does that. What's interesting is this shows and go and evaluate it. So I believe this is because in this time they were looking for this effect, whereas in that time they were looking for that effect, and they were biased because of blah 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 blah. Yeah, so you can see how you're kind of it's almost like you almost want to think about it as if you're sort of Crufts. I don't know if you know Crufts, the competition for the best trained and the best looking dogs. So the most like pedigree, wonderful dogs. So it's almost like as an English writer, as an English student of English language for this, it's like you're going, well, there's this horse here. And yes, it's a horse, just like this horse here. They're both horses, but this one is brown and this one is a darker brown, and this one is a female and this one is a male. Now, a female is going to be great because they could be an investment. They're going to have babies and things like that. Whereas a male, I'm not going to have to worry about the cost of raising children. See what I mean? So you're basically trying to evaluate and weigh up what these two sources are like. Okay. We ignore section B, but it does say another thing here. There's appropriate textual references, quotes, basically. Okay, so well, look when it says here and it says there, or at least saying, oh, in this section or in this line. Okay, so you need to refer to sources A and B. We know that. Using details from both sources to write a summary of what you understand. So I just want to really highlight this to you because the terminology on this question, so question 2 on paper 2 in section A, is always going to be use details from both sources to write a summary of what you understand about, and this is the only bit that will be different. Okay? It's asking you to show, what it's actually asking you to do is asking you to show how the writers have been influenced or why they've chosen what they wanted to do. So if you're looking for top marks on this, is this just this question? Yeah, this is just this question. So if you're looking for 7 to 8 marks, remember what we said about the mark scheme with these things here. The first level, the basic level, says it shows simple awareness of both texts, some interpretation, clear interpretation, perceptive interpretation. And that is hard because it kind of feels a bit subjective. It's kind of hard to know exactly what it's talking about. But when I read this to you, you'll understand. So a level 1, the answer here, the train in source A is big as it has lots of carriages because it says 5 sleeping cars. This is different to the train in source B, which is smaller. The train in source B is not as big as it is described, as a little engine, and it has 1 carriage. All of that is true. All of that is valid. But when you think about what it was asking us to look at earlier on the mark scheme, where's it gone? There it is. Identify and interpret explicit and implicit information and ideas. It does identify explicit information. Yeah, it does that. Is there anything that says, oh, this could mean that, or it could mean this? No. Does it give any ideas as to meaning? No. Is there evidence from different texts? Yeah, there is a little bit. It talks about the quotes and it being called little and having a little engine. Explain, comment on, and analyze. I can't see any analysis. So can you see what I'm saying? Like when an exam's looking at it, they're going to go through all these things, be like, well, it's got this, but not this. It's got this, but it's not got this. And so this case is very, very basic. Now, a lot of people say to me, how much should I be writing on this? And it's a tricky question because genuinely it's not about how much you write. However, even if you wrote the most wonderful 1 sentence, obviously you're not going to be able to get all those assessment objectives satisfied in 1 sentence. Equally, writing 3 pages on answering this question is not going to guarantee you a top mark if you haven't actually answered the question. That's all they're interested in. So don't waste time writing stuff down that you don't need because they're not interested. Okay. So level 1, there's not really an explanation. It's stating certain things and it's saying this is it. It's doing a bit of commenting and they're paraphrasing. So they're rephrasing what is said, but it doesn't really tell us any more about it than we already know, you know. Level 2, the train in source A is long and has an engine and several carriages, including a mail van, a dining car, and 5 sleeping cars, which shows that the train is used for many reasons. Yeah. This is different from the training source B, which is much shorter and more basic. Training source B has just a little engine and an uncovered carriage, which shows it's not very comfortable. Not definitely. It may be uncomfortable. However, if you look back, the lad that was in the inside the train that here they're saying is really comfortable, he was saying was really uncomfortable because the luggage fell on him and everything was really cramped. And the lady, I think it's a lady, it felt that way, who was in the original, who was in the earlier text, she was talking about, yes, a very basic train, but she was saying, oh, it was lovely. There were benches out and I could feel the air, and she loved it. So it's not entirely accurate, and there's no tentative language. So instead of the training source B has just a little engine and an uncovered carriage, which could show it's not very comfortable, you might get away with that, but you're definitely not going to get away with it because it doesn't articulate what it was said in the carriage. It shows they've not really read it properly. Okay, but they have written more things. They have said they've compared the size of the two things, which is done here, but here is just a little bit more there's a little bit more explanation. And it's also given a bit more detail about what was actually on the train. And showing that it was used for many reasons. So that's, yeah, but it doesn't really give us any more information than that, really. It's still only really just telling us what we already know. Basically, your job in these questions is to help the reader of your piece see the text in a different way than it's literally presented. Help them think about things like, oh, I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, that might mean that. Yeah, that's basically what your job is. So 5 to 6 marks. The train in source A has an engine and several carriages, which include a mail van, a dining car, and 5 sleeping cars, showing that it is used to transport letters and that people can eat and sleep on it, which suggests how the train has been developed to have a range of purposes. Brilliant. Now that tells me if it's further developed, that is a comment on the fact that one is a text from one is a later text than the other. Okay, and showing that science has developed to create a better train in 1933 than it did in 1830, I think it was. The dates I think were mixed up there, by the way. Okay, this is very different to source B, where the steam engine has just been invented, excellent, and has a much more basic purpose, which is to provide a new and quicker form of transport. In source B, the train is simply an engine and an uncovered carriage with benches, so the lack of shelter and comfortable facilities suggests it's in a much earlier stage of its development. Brilliant. So it's showing that your knowledge of the impact of the science of the time, it's showing that you know what that impact has had on the writer, because the way they're writing it shows that. So you need to show off that knowledge of your history. But to get top marks, it needs to be perceptive. So you need to really notice things. Now, the thing I find with a lot of English students is they do notice all of this, but they don't write it down for two reasons. One, it feels a bit pointless because it's really obvious. Or two, they think, well, the examiner already knows this, so I don't need to write it down that clearly. You have to describe this as if nobody has read those sources and as if nobody understands what you're trying to say. Okay? They've not read them. They've not read the question. They need to be able to understand exactly what it is that you're trying to say without that information. So here we've got 7 to 8 marks. The train in source A is being used to transport mail and people, so has a mail van, a dining car, and 5 sleeping cars, showing both the advances in train manufacture and the commercialisation of rail travel to enable long journeys by providing eating and sleeping facilities. So they've now used that to show that by having a food cart and things like that, shows that if it's needed, they've been able to use, they've been able to adapt the trains so that it can go for long journeys. Whereas the original one, she only went down a tunnel and through the other end, I think. She didn't go very far at all. So this shows how it's developed. The sophistication reflects significant progress in train travel and is a complete contrast to source B, where the steam engine is an earlier model and is therefore much simpler in its design. In source B, the train is just a functional uncovered carriage with benches, as the purpose at this stage of invention is to develop the mechanics of the engine, not to provide more elaborate passenger facilities. So you can see how they've got perceptive inferences. So if something's inferred, it's kind of like implied. It's said. It's not said obviously, kind of like I was just talking about. It's not said really obviously in the text, but it's suggested. That's kind of what that means. Selects judicious references. So in other words, enough that's appropriate and ones that make sense. Don't just chuck in any old quote just because you've got to get a quote in there. But not only that, they've also embedded them in the sentence. So just a reminder for you to embed quotes is to put them in a sentence so that if you took away the speech marks, you wouldn't be able to tell where the quote is and where the sentence is. So, for example, if you took away these quotes, you'd have, in source B, the train is just a functional uncovered carriage with benches as the purpose at this early stage of invention, blah, blah, blah. It would read just normally, wouldn't it? So the fact they've done that, you get extra marks for. Whereas if you said, in source B, it says, or they say, that there is an uncovered carriage. Yeah, it's just a bit, or the quote that says there's an uncovered carriage, as soon as you say this quote, or they say, or it says, it's not embedded. Okay. Statements show perceptive differences between the texts. So it's perceptive because it's looking at the science of the two things, and then it's sort of saying, okay, well, what impact does that have on the wider world? Remember, we were talking about this. So you're not just talking about here, it's Google Earth, isn't it? Here is, what does the text say? This one is, what does the text say, and what has the writer done to make us do that and understand that a little bit more? Okay. Here is, what does the text say? What does the writer say? And how is the effect of science or history, how has that affected the writer to write it this way? But then here, it's talking about much more about the historical side, much more about the development, and also how it's how the function of the train has changed. Not just saying it's developed. It's not just an undeveloped train and then a developed train. It's an underdeveloped train, or a new idea developed into not only an amazing train, but also a train that has another function, which is to serve its passengers by having a food train and sleeping arrangements and things like that. It suddenly has a new function, which isn't just to deliver things or be transport, but actually to be up there for long journeys. So that addition is perceptive, to sort of take that from it, make you, oh yeah, actually, yeah, I thought of it like that. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. But look, still only, what's that? 1, 2, 3 sentences. Yes, they are long sentences, but also the vocabulary in there is great as well. Yeah. So commercialization of rail travel, sophistication, significant. Yeah. All these words are absolutely brilliant. Elaborate. Yeah. So that is all going to help get those 7 to 8 marks as well. Okie dokie. Question 3. You now need to refer to only source A from lines 12 to 23. And then again, this question, so question 3 on paper 2 will always be, how does the writer use language to describe? And in this case, it's the train crash. Okay. So what I would be doing is I'd be going to source A and looking for lines 12 to 23. Source A, 12 to 23, brilliant. So it's this bit here, lovely stuff. And I'm going to be looking at the vocabulary that describes the accident. So frightful, jarring, heaviest suitcase, cannonaded down, catching me with fearful force, a nice bit of alliteration there, on either kneecap, the end of the world, bit of hyperbole there, or dramatisation, or catastrophising. Broken both my legs, My little world was tilted drunkenly, but a personification of his world. The window showed me nothing except a few fields. It was 6 o'clock. I began to dress. I felt very much annoyed. So lots of short sentences there. That snappy, oh, don't like it. It's giving away that annoyed feeling, isn't it? But I climbed out of the carriage to a refreshingly spectacular world, and the annoyance passed. So now he's feeling better. A lovely long sentence with some longer vocabulary, some more advanced vocabulary compared to it was 6 o'clock. I began to dress. I felt very much annoyed. Yeah. The Trans-Siberian Express train sprawled foolishly down the embankment. The mail van and the dining car, foolishly, so another personification, lay on their sides at the bottom, really real personification in both of them, referring to the train as a she or a her. Behind them, the 5 sleeping cars, headed by my own, were disposed in attitudes, which became less and less grotesque until you got to the last. So instead of saying they were less and less affected by the crash, or they were less and less tilted, he says they were, what's the word he says? Less and less grotesque. So the first carriage is grotesque because it's come off and it's all like bedraggled. The next one a bit, but not as much. The next kind of okay. The next a bit off rails. The last one's absolutely fine. Yeah. Primly, again, personification, and making it this train kind of quite upper class, if you're prim and proper. 50 yards down the line, the engine, which had parted company with the train. So here, parted company with the train. Now, someone else might say the engine that had come away from the train, or the engine that had cleared off, or the engine and the train were in completely separate places. Yeah, but it's parted company, so it's making it, again, playing up to that personification and the class that is given this character of the train. Was dug in, snorting steams, again personification. On top of the embankment, it had a defiant and naughty look. It was definitely conscious of indiscretion. Well, as we know, Victorian etiquette was all about avoiding indiscretion or avoiding shame or anybody being rude or considered in any way naughty or bad. So the fact that the train is meant to be prim and proper and has been indiscreet or has been rude in some way by falling over is obviously very typical to Victorian etiquette. So let's have a look at the mark scheme. Level 1. The writer describes the train crash as, from the rack above me, my heaviest suitcase was cannonaded down. This is hyperbole, as it is just a suitcase hitting his legs, but he uses this to emphasise how heavy it was. Absolutely right. Bang on. Lovely. But it's not enough. They've only mentioned one thing. There's loads more that could go in there. And actually, that's not describing the train crash. It's describing what happened as a result of the train crash. So this verbiage here, the way they've written it, the way they've worded it, isn't exactly accurate. So that's another reason why they'd have got lower marks. Level 2, the writer uses lots of different language to describe the train crash. He uses the hyperbole, my heaviest suitcase was cannonaded down, to show how the crash was powerful enough to move a heavy object so that it smashed into his knees. Absolutely right. Again, just not enough stuff in there. It's just, you know, where's the other different language? Give me some examples. Where's your quotes? And what's the use of them? Why did he choose those words? Level 3, 7 to 9 marks out of 12. The writer uses the hyperbole, my heaviest suitcase was cannonaded down, to describe how the train crash was so forceful that it felt like he was being bombarded. So what they've done here is they've actually described what this means. Now, it could be that they do know, but it makes me think that earlier on, these lower marked ones, didn't really know what they meant by cannonized. Yeah, or cannonaded, I should say. So, you know, give a bit of a description, give an insight into what they're trying to do. The metaphor, excellent. So we've now got a second language technique that's been named. Okay, the metaphor of cannonaded suggests that the impact of the train crash turns the suitcase into a weapon being fired, which creates the idea of the writer being under attack. Fantastic. Now we're getting some of the effects. What is the writer trying to do? They're trying to create a picture, they're trying to paint an image of him lying in his bed and his suitcase basically being a cannonball shot out, intentionally attacking his legs. That's clearly not the case. His suitcase is just on top. It's fallen down because the train has crashed. But he's annoyed and he feels attacked and he's feeling irritable. And the writer is finding a way to present this character in this way by making the suitcase seem like it's the ammunition from an attack. Okay, and if someone feels attacked, they feel upset, defensive, angry. Yeah, and they're that's the image we're trying to get, and we know that's true because we see that from the short sentences later. Where's the reference to the short sentences here? Yeah, to back this up even more. And the top level, the writer uses the hyperbole, "My heaviest suitcase was cannonaded down," to describe how the impact of the train crash was like a deliberate act of warfare. There we go, deliberate. The use of the military verb cannonaded, lovely. So what they've done here, which is something that I mentioned in my poetry when I'm teaching my poetry module, is you can group together some vocabulary and give it your own title. So one of the things some people worry about is they don't want to say, oh, this is homely vocabulary, or this is military vocabulary, or this is technological vocabulary, whatever it may be, because they think that there's a set list somewhere that has this list of what kind of vocab you can use. There isn't. Find a theme. If you're talking about a theme, find a theme about all this vocabulary and give it a title. So if it's military or war or so this attacking kind of thing, then put things like that, military verb or military vocabulary. Yeah, it gives it a theme because there's more than one example. So the use of the military verb cannonaded conveys the writer's sense. Oh, here we go. Really clear, obvious, like lights going rah, rah, rah. The writer's sense. Yeah, this person who's writing this answer has very cleverly been really obvious and said, I feel the writer is doing this. The writer has a sense of this. And they're writing that. So that's excellent. The use of the military verb cannonaded conveys the writer's sense of being victimized as he describes the simple dislodging of his suitcase by physical force as a metaphorical attack by the train, as it has turned his own possession into a weapon to be used against him. So you can see the difference, can't you? This is not a complete response. It says here, it's not a model answer nor a complete response, nor does it seek to exemplify any particular content. So it's not about saying that you have to say these points. It's giving you an idea of how, if we were looking at something like hyperbole, you might use this as an example. Here's an example of naming a language technique. Here we've named it but added a little bit of a comment. Here we've looked at the same thing, added the comment and analysed it, and here we've added on everything and the effect and all that kind of that stuff. So this is just showing you the progression. It's not showing you the complete thing that you should write, because you can put more things in and you don't have to write those particular things. This is just an example. Okay, so these are the effective language features: onomatopoeia, adjectives, verbs, alliteration, short sentence. Yeah, see, look, we were talking about this. Adverbs: drunkenly, refreshingly, primly, definitely. Zoomorphisms: snorting steam. Personification, metaphors, juxtaposition, hyperbole. So we know all of these. We've got all of those. And so there are loads of things you could write about. You might not write about hyperbole, and that doesn't mean that you won't get a mark just because that's the example they've used here. You can use any of these examples. That's just showing you the progression of how to sort of like look at how you would grade that. Okay, question 4. How long have we got? 4 minutes. For this question, you need to refer to the whole of source A and the whole of source B. Compare how the writers convey their different feelings and perspectives about their experiences of travelling on a train. So, Question 4 in paper 2 will always be compare how the writers convey their different feelings and perspectives about, and it will be the both sources in full. In your answer, you could, which means you should, compare their different feelings and perspectives, compare the methods the writer used to convey the different feelings and perspectives, support your response with reference to both texts. And as I always say, this is basically your, this whole thing is basically your plan that we've done together. So you make your point, which is the writer is trying to make us feel this. Then you're going to say where they do it, give some examples. They do it in this bit, in this bit, in this bit, when they say this or do this. And then you analyse it a bit and say, this is how they're doing it. This is why they're doing it. They're trying to make us feel this, and they do it by using this word and this word combined with this sentence structure, combined with this whatever. Okay. And that's how you put together your answer. So you can see here, I'll just read through this and then we'll get on to the next one in a minute. So level 1. So can you see the color coding? Simple cross references. That means looking at the two different sources and comparing the facts in both of them. Simple identification of the writer's methods. That's the yellow. And awareness of ideas and perspectives is the pink. So the writer of Source A feels that his experience of travelling by train is negative and he doesn't like it. At the start, he repeats no more to show the bad things that happen and things about the train journey. This is different from Source B, where the writer feels positive about her train ride. She says my raptures to her friend at the start of her letter. This shows that the writer has liked her experience. Next one, level 2, which is 5 to 8. This level 2 is not like grade 1 to 9. It's not the same thing. It's a different level of marking. The writer of Source A feels that his experience of travelling by train has been awful and he's fed up of being on the train. At the start, he uses repetition and listing of no more to emphasise the things he doesn't like about the train. On the other hand, the writer in Source B has really enjoyed her train ride and had a great time. She uses the phrase my raptures to make it clear that her experience was very exciting. This shows that she's more enthusiastic about her experience. Finally, top marks. The writer of Source A feels his experience of train travel has been miserable because he has been on his train for so long and become bored, so he's looking forward to the end of his long journey. He uses repetition and listing of no more in his first paragraph to highlight how many aspects of the experience he cannot wait to leave behind. On the other hand, the writer in Source B feels that her train ride has been thrilling, which may link, lovely, we've got may, which means it's a critical answer, may link to this being her first time on a train, unlike the more experienced writer of Source A. Her delight in the experience is clear at the start of her letter, where the noun raptures suggests she felt in a state of utter joy. So it's not just saying that, oh, she was in raptures, she was having a good time. It's saying it's clear and it's a noun and it's showing that she is in utter joy. So it's explaining it a bit more. She's amazed by her journey because it is such a new and extraordinary experience. So again, using the knowledge that this was a new invention at this time is really interesting and shows that you have a bit of background knowledge on that era. So if the quality of the response is level 1, but only deals with one text, the maximum mark is 2. So you must mention both texts. If the quality of the response is level 2, but only deals with one text, the maximum mark is 6. So you're capped if you only talk about one source. Student has to deal with both texts to achieve level 3 or above. References to the writer's methods may be implicit without specific mention of the writer. So you don't have to mention the writer, but if you do, it makes it a lot easier. Content may include the comparison of feelings and perspectives, such as boredom and intrigue, loathing and liking, familiarity and novelty, apathy, curiosity, experience, innocence, underwhelmed, overwhelmed, confinement, freedom, contempt, and an admiration for the train. And it may comment on methods such as first-person accounts, chronological narrative structure, shifts between action and reflection, climax of the train crash, tone, language features, audience, and word choice. Okay. We are going to leave it there because I ran over by a minute. I'm so sorry. And we'll be looking at question 5 on Wednesday. Okay, and we'll be doing a bit more writing. Lovely to see you back, and I look forward to seeing you on Wednesday, guys. Take care. Bye.
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 Thank you.
You're welcome.